So in between every single League of Legends match I have played within probably the last month, I have been working on this farming game I talked about in a video like 2 weeks ago. Progress has been going insanely smooth, I must say. I actually never would have thought I would be able to make a game, any game for that matter. Like, it has always amazed me, and I am so happy to actually be doing it. Anyways, I have decided to actually start making my own textures and models for the game to get more of a vision of what the product is going to look like in the end. I recently got Sprite on Steam, and I've been making some textures and have also been making Lindsay slave away at making me textures as well. But that's just because she's way more artistically in touch than I am. The pixel art-esque textures that can be produced from Sprite are absolutely amazing. I do have to say, I am actually in love with the low poly pixelated style that you see in so many indie games. But looking at tons of other indie games on YouTube, I guess I just fit right in. It does seem to be the budget way of building assets for a game, at least to me, but ultimately I don't really care because of how good it ends up looking if you do it right. But you have to do it right. However, as I mentioned earlier, I am not an artist and I will never claim to be an artist. So having Lindsay do a lot of the textures makes them turn out way better than I could ever produce, but they always turn out better than I think they look in my head. So as you can see here, I did go through and model a couple of low poly plants, I guess. These are just two for now. They're not even textured. I just put it through a base color on here for just a placeholder to get an idea. So if you can't tell what it is, we have a strawberry and a potato, which if you can't tell what it is, I'm sorry. I tried my best. These ultimately did turn out better than I expected though. I also did go ahead and I modeled the goblin because that's the enemy that I want for the game. I wanted a goblin for the game, so I went through and made a goblin. Here you can see I actually rigged it up a little bit with just a little tech I got off of Mixamo because, like I said, this is all a work in progress. It's all being made as I go along, so I might eventually just make my own animation, but if I'm lazy, I'll just use the Mixamo one. Same story as the plants. I went through and modeled the general body type I want for the enemy instead of having those just yellow capsules chase you around. I put leather straps on them and leather belt and loincloth. If you know, you know. But yeah, these textures here are also just placeholder textures. And this little rod right here is a metal rod that I had to shove through his neck for Mixamo to realize that it's actually one piece and one model instead of several different parts that can't be shoved together into a single model. It's just a weird Mixamo thing. So I had to shove an iron rod through his neck for that to work. Something interesting that I also wanted to mention is that there are a ton of different textures that go into different models because each different material you have requires a draw call from the CPU, which is essentially telling the CPU to render a certain material on a certain object. So what you should do is put textures together in an atlas, which I did over here. There are some Blender add-ons that make this like insanely easy. Here you can see we have one material. Right here I have my roof fucking huge for the sake of getting the texture stretched out and just tiled, really, not stretched, that's the wrong word. You can see that we have all of our textures laid out on a single map. So this whole thing will require a single draw call from the CPU, since it's all technically a single texture, even though it's applied to different part of the models. I thought that was pretty cool. Also, I've been going through some courses on gamedev.tv. I got a humble bundle for like 20 bucks or something stupid cheap like that, that goes over a bunch of like different aspects of Unity and how to make certain systems. And one of the things they go over is a finite state machine. And I thought that was really cool. So I decided to yoink that and kind of make one. I still have to set it up, but I have the basis down. And finite state machine might mean fuck all to someone who has never heard of it before, because this shit is pretty wild. I know at first I had no idea what it was, and still until I did some research and figured it out. So I do not blame you. I was in that same position. But what it is, or more importantly, what it does, is it allows you to do a set of actions from a certain state. So like if you're standing and you walk, you'll move at a normal speed. If you jump, you'll jump. You'll go to the in air state. Then once you're in a different state, you have a different set of actions. Like if you want to make bee hopping a thing, if you're in the air and you walk, you will move faster so that you can bee hop. Or if you want it to do nothing, you can just have nothing in there. So if you want double jump, you can add a double jump. If you don't want double jump, you just put nothing here. If you crouch in the air state, then like you can ground slam or do whatever. That's also how games seem to add like sliding and stuff like that. Cool little things that you can do from certain states that the player is in. And this is really awesome because it can allow me to do things like I mentioned before, ground slamming, sliding, double jumping, flying. Like you can do so much with a finite state machine. The possibilities really are endless, which is kind of ironic because keyword in this is finite. And then finally, what I did in these last couple weeks is I made a dictionary. So now I can look up objects through their strings, whatever I set it to, which if we go over here back into Unity, we look at our potato. You notice I spelled potato wrong. I know that. But you can set an ID. We can set this to whatever, and then it gets linked up in the dictionary, and it will always return whatever I'm looking up by using the get string ID function. So that's really cool. That should really help when having to reference other objects without having to set them all manually in the inspector using serialized fields. But it does lead to a lot more hard coding, which can be good or bad depending on how you look at it. But most importantly, it is laying groundwork for the future, just kind of future-proofing some things. That's always a good thing to have. I also made the shitty little attack animation for these enemies. I'll definitely refine this, and this is just a random ass sword I got off the Unity Assets store. A lot of things I'm just pulling assets from just for placeholders, just so that I can keep production moving along without having to worry about the small things too much. You know how it is. I bet you get the idea. That is all I have for today, though. I hope some of you internet strangers out there learned something or found the video interesting. I know I have definitely been enjoying myself, but yeah, that's all. I will see you guys hopefully next week.